Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the tragic murder of 17-year-old Michele Missy Avila. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week. Not recently, but sometimes. And I'd love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. Alright, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can get into this video. Now, this is a case that was suggested to me a number of times by Lily, Luna, London Girl, lots of else, and also Christina. And I just want to say to all of you, thank you for your suggestion. Now, this is a case that inspired the Lifetime movie. At least I think it was a Lifetime movie. Either way, it inspired a movie called A Killer Among Friends, and somehow I had never actually heard the details of this case. Based on how many people suggested this case, though, it's clearly a well-known case, but somehow it just went right over my head. And then once I started looking into the details of it, I was like, people just need to, chill out, drink a 7-Up, eat a moon pie, stop murdering people. Because it's crazy that things like this can happen, especially by people that you would least expect it. With all of that said, today I'm going to tell you the entire story, and while I do, I'm going to be putting on a full face of makeup, hence the makeup in Morbid makeup. It's going to be a more chill makeup today because I got to go to the doctor right after, and it's raining outside. If you hear that, I'm sorry, but that's what's going to be happening today. If that's not really your thing, thanks for hanging out this long. It's been cool. I hope you find a channel that presents this case in a way you prefer more, but if you're on the fence, you're not sure how you feel, maybe stick around. You might be surprised by how much you like me. So now come, gather around, and let me tell you the story of the tragic murder of 17-year-old Michele Missy Avila. Michele Avila, who went by the nickname Missy, was born on February 8, 1968 in Los Angeles, California. Missy lived with her mother, Irene, and her 3 brothers, Ernie, Chris, and Mark, and they lived in Arleta, which is a neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. She had a father, obviously, but her mother and father were divorced at one point, and I'm not sure how involved he really was in her life after that, just simply because there are hardly any interviews or quotes with him about Missy's death. But that could just be that he's private. Again, I'm not so sure what his relationship was. So we're just gonna put him to the side and be like, okay, he was here maybe he wasn't, I don't know. Moving on. Growing up, Missy was known as being a very well-liked girl from even a young age. She was popular. She was fun to be around, and she was very pretty, both physically and in her personality. She was just that girl who had something about her, the it factor, something that pulled you in. Boys wanted to be near her, girls wanted to be her. And some girls, I'm sure, wanted to be with her as well. I don't know, but you get the sentiment. Although Missy was very popular and had a multitude of friends, there was no lack of friends in Missy's life growing up. She did have one main best friend, as many girls do in junior high and high school, pretty much throughout their whole life. I know I still have a very best friend. And this is a girl that she met very young, a girl named Karen Severson. Or Severson? Severson. Karen and Missy met when they were both only 8 years old, and the two were totally inseparable from that time on. They were always together from the day they met. Apparently, the day that they met, it was the day that Missy and her family actually moved into the area. And Missy had this cat, right? And this cat was like, fuck this, and dipped and got lost. So Missy was out looking for the cat, and she saw Karen. So she walked over and asked if Karen had seen this elusive cat. And she was like, no, but you know what I can do? I can help you find this cat. So the two looked for the kid together. Now, I'm sorry. I know if you're like me, your first thought is, what happened to the cat? Did they find the cat? And I'm sorry to say that I could not find any information on whether or not they found this elusive cat. But what they did find that day was a long-lasting and very strong friendship. They were more than best friends. They were like those types of best friends that are like family. They were always together. They were always with each other's families. They were close with each other's parents. They were inseparable. They always stood by each other and stood up for each other in the face of any obstacles and stood up for each other in the face of any obstacles at school. They'd just grown up together, you know, they grew up on the same block, they dressed the same Barbies, they listened to the same bands, they flirted with the same boys. They were just each other's number one. That was until the girls turned 14. At 14 years old, Karen actually got pregnant, so she was gonna be a teen mama, and because of this, like, things changed a little bit. Karen ended up dropping out of school so that she could give birth, and with the distance between the two and like Karen being really busy having some other things to do and Missy, you know, wanting to do 14-year-old girl things, the two had a totally normal and natural and common growing out process. It was kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing. And I mean, I feel like we've all been there where something happens in your teenage years and a friend that you were really close with, just all of a sudden you're not as close with because you're going down very different paths. But this was said to have been very hard for Karen because, okay, and I'm gonna be sympathetic for 14-year-old Karen at this moment because that would be very hard, right? Becoming a teenage mother, like, one, kudos to her. I don't know how anyone, or kudos to anyone who does that, because I don't know how anyone could do that, because I'm 33 years old. I'm about to have a baby and I feel like a baby having a baby, you know what I mean? So I can't imagine doing it at 14 and seeing your life change so much in those years that are supposed to be like formative and fun. So it's a lot. And Karen was also just like the kind of friend who was always a little bit obsessed with Missy. She was very much the type of friend that didn't want her friends to have other friends. We all know those people. You just wanted this person all for yourself. So to see the distance growing between them and to see her moving on and making new friends and like getting boyfriends and not seeing her as much was really hard. She'd like tried to invite Missy over and try to get her to come to her house because she wasn't really going out because she had a little baby. And it was just hard for them to make plans because Missy was moving on and making new friends and she always seemed to be busy. And this was hard for young Karen. But with that said, if you know this story, I think we can collectively say, fuck Karen. So, the two girls aren't as close. They're growing apart. Missy is making new friends, meeting boys, and everything's cool and everything's civil, right? Okay, great. Great story. The end. No, that's not the end. So, Missy starts dating this guy named Randy. And Randy is like some super hot party guy. And at first, Missy's all about it, but then she's like, this isn't really for me. He's kind of a bit too much. So they break up. The relationship's really short. It only lasts a 1 month. It only lasted 1 month. The two broke up and everything was fine. Everything was cool. No big deal. Except that like right after Missy and Randy broke up, Randy got a new girlfriend and guess who he started dating? Karen. Missy's. They're still friends at this point. They're just not as close. They're still probably calling each other best friend. They're just not really talking as much anymore and he starts dating her. And he wasn't even like mildly dating her. The two ended up moving in together, Randy and Karen. Now, I have two things. One, are these like actual children in high school? Why are you babies moving in together? But two, not cool, Karen. Friends do not date friends' ex-boyfriends. Ex-boyfriends are just off limits to friends. That's like the rules of feminism, right? Now, this did not go over well, as I'm sure some of you can imagine. I'm sure there's some of you that are kind of like, what's the big deal? They were broken up, it didn't work out, it was a short relationship, etc., etc. But coming from the position, the point of view, the perspective of a girl who was once in high school and had something similar like this happen to her, it can be a big deal, it can suck, it does and can feel like a betrayal, and it's just like not the nicest thing to do. There are a jillion fish in the sea. Why do you gotta go for your friend's ex-fish? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not the nicest thing. So by this time, Michelle's in high school and she's going to San Fernando High and she's starting to get into a little more trouble. She's starting to get rebellious and she was just a teenager, you know? She was hanging out with a more rowdy crowd, a more troublesome group. She had been skipping classes and getting into a little bit of trouble at school. So she actually ended up getting kicked out of her high school and sent to an alternative school. And I hadn't really heard of an alternative school, but I imagine it's like a continuation school. And this school was San Fernando Mission, and she was sent there to finish off her years. And if you don't know what these things are and you've never heard of these types of schools, it's not as big of a deal as it sounds like it is. I actually was sent to a continuation school in high school to finish off my years as well, because some kids just, are a bit of a handful and like to fuck around and need a little more structure and like sit the fuck down and do your schoolwork and stop being a little asshole, you know? It's not uncommon. Anyways, guess who else ended up at this frickin' continuation school, dude? Frickin' Karen, bro. Apparently, after her baby was born and got a little bit bigger, Karen went back to school and she ended up also being sent to the same continuation school. And I don't know if the two were really as close of friends then. I think they were still like civil adjacent and kind of being friends, but they definitely weren't as close as they used to be. And it was while at the school that both girls ended up reuniting with another friend that they had who ended up at the school. This was an 18-year-old girl named Laura Doyle, and they both were friends with this girl and had known her since they were 8 years old. They had all grown up on the same block. Again, it's not clear to me at this point if the two girls, if Karen and Missy had, you know, decided to be friends, if they had squashed their beef, if they had buried their hatchet, if you will, but they were both friends with Laura. Laura was like that mutual person in the group of three, which we've already talked about how groups of three with teenage girls is fucking trouble. But either way, they did spend time with Laura, either all together as a group, probably awkwardly, or independently. Karen said of her relationship with Missy at this point, and I quote, "Even when I was back at school, I saw less of Missy. It really hurt. I felt like she dropped me. I'd always been there for her, her loyal protector. So I turned on Missy. I found another girl, Laura Doyle, who didn't like Missy either. Once, I would have defended her, but now I joined in on the cruelty." Either way, the tension was there, and the fans of Tension's Flame would be... The flames of tension would be fanned when Karen and Missy were both at a party, right? They're at the same party, they're hanging out, they're having a good time. I don't know if they were hanging out together, if they were hanging out separate, but they were both there. You know who else was there? Randy. Karen's boyfriend, Missy's ex. And you know what Randy does? He straight up openly flirts with Missy. He goes as far as to like grab her and pull her down on his lap and tell her how much he misses her. And she's like, "You guy, like, I don't want this. You're dating my friend. Don't be such a loser." And Missy even went to Karen and told her everything that happened, told her like, "This guy fucking sucks. You should dump him. Like, he's a loser." And Karen, instead of being like, "Wow, yeah, he fucking sucks," she got mad at Missy instead of at her deadbeat loser ass boyfriend. And I have a serious problem with this. I've told you guys this before in a video. I can't remember which one I mentioned it in, but like, you gotta like properly direct your anger when it comes to these situations, especially when it comes to like cheating and things like that. So often you see that a man cheats on his partner and the girl gets mad at the person he cheated with instead of the man who promised her he'd be faithful to her. And I just find that I often find that to be rather dumb. In this situation, it's a little bit different. Like if Missy was cheating with Randy, I could see how Karen would be rightfully mad at both of them because this was her friend. But that wasn't the situation here, as far as we know. Like Randy just pulled her into his lap, so it's misdirected anger at Missy. But anyways, all this tension that these two girls had ended up coming to a head one day when they got into like a fist fight at a local park. Apparently they had been there. I don't know what was said, but all of a sudden they start getting into a fight that has Karen getting the upper hand. She like knocks her to the ground, is punching her over and over, and then like threatens to beat her in the head with a beer bottle. It got really messy. So the two were not really friends at this point. They hadn't seen each other in a while. After this fight, they didn't see each other for an entire month. And then Missy died, and that was very odd for them because they typically spent a lot of time together. So this is like the longest they had gone without really communicating. But like, would you want to still be friends with your friend if you got in like a fist fight and they were gonna beat a beer bottle over your head? Probably not. I mean, maybe. I don't know what you're into, but I wouldn't. I would take the friendship L and be like, well, it was fun while it lasted, but this is unhealthy. You do your thing, I do my thing. Later, player. I want nothing but good things for your life, but I want you to experience those good things over there, away from me. Oh, and previous to that, I didn't even freaking think about this. Like, Karen was so mad at Missy that, okay, Karen went over one day to Missy's family's house when Missy wasn't there so that she could sit and talk with her mother. And I don't really think that that's weird, personally, because my best friend, definitely, when, like, we all lived in the same state, would hang out with my mom without me. That wasn't uncommon. They had their own relationship because she was like family. She is like family. That's still my best friend. And that's what Karen and Missy's mother were like too. They were like family. So one day she went over and was talking to Missy's mother, Irene, without Missy there. But she was like talking mad shit on Missy to her own mother's face. And as I'm sure you can imagine, Missy's mother like wasn't fucking having it. And she said of her conversation, this particular conversation with Karen, and I quote, she said my daughter took everybody's boyfriend away, and that she was just a big flirt. I just told her, if you're not going to talk right, just get out. So on October 2nd, 1985, Missy Avila told her mother that she was going to be spending that day with her friend Laura. Laura was going to be picking her up. They were going to be gone the whole day. They were going to go to the park, same park where Missy had recently fought Karen. But it wasn't a big deal. This wasn't uncommon. This is a place that Irene said that Missy and her friends went all the time. So around 3:30 p.m., Missy said goodbye to her mother. She got in the car and she headed off with Laura Doyle. And this would be the last time that Irene would ever see her daughter alive again. Irene said of that horrible night after her daughter left, and I quote, I stayed up all night with that front door open to see if my daughter was coming home, and she never did. But now we're going to backtrack before she knew that her daughter was missing, and that was when she first got an indication that something may be wrong, and that was at about 6 p.m. when her phone rang. She picked up the phone, and who was on the other end of the phone? But Laura Doyle. And Laura was asking to speak to Missy on the phone. And Irene was like, what the fuck are you talking about, Laura? Missy just left with you a couple of hours ago and she said she was going to be with you all day. So why would you be calling for her? And this is when Laura told Irene a very interesting, inventive, and odd story. Laura tells Irene that yes, they did plan to spend the whole day together, that they were going to go to the park, that it was going to be a really great time. But that on the way, they were going to the park and Laura needed to stop for gas. But Missy just simply could not wait and needed Laura to drop her off at the park first and then to go get the gas by herself after. And so that's what she did, that she went, she dropped her off at the park and then she left to get her gas. Which is odd. Now, why would Missy really, really want to get to the park like immediately? Why couldn't she wait just to go for a quick trip of gas? Like that seemed like a pretty quick errand. Well, Laura tells Irene, when I got her to the park to drop her off, there was a car there, a blue Camaro with a couple of guys in it that Missy was meeting up with. So the reason she was in such a hurry to get to the park is because she was meeting a boy there. So Laura dropped Missy off. She went, she met up with the boys in the Camaro. They were having a great time with their blue Camaro. And Laura left to go get the gas. She went, she got the gas, she headed right back. But when she got there, Missy, the boys, and the blue Camaro were just gone. So as Irene's quote would indicate, she sat up that whole night waiting for her daughter to come home with the door open. And when Missy still had not returned home by morning, her mother went in and filed a missing persons report. Just days later, any hope that Missy's family had of finding her, bringing her home safe, of this just being a big misunderstanding, was destroyed when hikers found Missy's body. She was located in the woods at Colby Canyon, which was in the Los Angeles National Forest. Where she was found was an area that was only accessible by foot, where there was a small clearing with a bunch of large rocks around a creek. It was covered in cigarette butts and beer bottles and other trash, and it was a place where the girls would frequently go to drink beer and party, and it was about 45 minutes from her home and where she was last seen alive. Missy was found face down in the stream. She had been drowned in ankle-deep water. Her hair, which was like long, dark auburn hair, had been hacked off in chunks at her scalp, and she was laying face down in the stream, and there was a large log. It was like a 4-foot, 100-pound log that was holding her face down into the stream. Missy Avila was only 17 years old. So police started to investigate quickly, but Irene, Missy's mother, could not just like sit back and wait for them to handle the investigation. She had to do things herself. She had to be out there doing everything she could in her power to find her daughter's murder her. So she literally would go out all the time driving around looking for this blue Camaro, stopping blue Camaros and asking the people to get out of their cars. And in hindsight, she says she feels bad about that because she was hassling innocent people. But this is the only thing she had to go on. And every step of the way, Karen or Laura, not always both of them, usually Karen, but Laura as well, were right by her side, going with her to search all the cars, just staying right by her to make sure that they could be there to support her and make sure that they were active members of the investigation. Both Karen and Laura did go to Missy's funeral, obviously. They were good friends and they needed to show their support. Laura also sent Missy's mother a sympathy card that had $20 in it, which I didn't really understand. Maybe that's a thing, I don't know. And in the card, it said that, Laura was so heartbroken about what happened to Missy, and that, Irene wasn't just Missy's mother, but her mother as well. Little fucking bitch is what she is. Sorry, but not sorry. And as far as Karen goes, according to Irene, Karen and her daughter, moved in to Missy's family home. In interviews after the fact, Karen says that this is not what happened, that she didn't move into the family home. But that's what Irene, Missy's mother, says happened. Either way, she was definitely there a lot. She definitely made herself known. And Missy's family said that Karen became just obsessed with the case and with Missy, and that she was devastated, and that she would often go to Missy's grave, and that at Christmas time she even brought a Christmas tree to Missy's grave, the cemetery where Missy was buried, and that she would often go to the place in the woods where Missy's body was found, and that she even straight up had a murder board up on the wall with the red string and the fucking pictures and the thumbtacks, just trying to solve the murder. Missy's mother, Irene, said of Karen during this time, and I quote, "I trusted Karen so much. We all trusted her. She was my daughter's best friend. They grew up together. That girl was part of my family. Karen used to see me every day and saw the hell that I was going through." Despite everyone's best efforts, the police really had no information to go on. They couldn't find any suspects, any real good leads, and the case went cold for 2 years. So for those entire 2 years, police had only heard the one story from Laura, that Laura dropped Missy off at the park, that she was there with the boys in the blue Camaro, that she left, and when she came back they were just nowhere to be found. But after 2 years, Laura changed her story, and now she was telling police that she didn't drop Missy off at the park, that she had actually dropped Missy off at a church. Okay, and the reason that she didn't bring this information sooner to police was that she didn't want to get in trouble, because what was happening at that church involved a drug deal. I can't imagine what police were thinking at this point, because it's just such a wildly different story. But regardless of this, police looked into this one as well, and this tip produced no leads, no real suspects, and again, the case went cold for another year. So now it's 3 years. It was in July of 1988 that police got their first real lead that led them to an arrest. And this is when a girl came forward to give them some information. A girl named Eva Trombolo. And this girl's name is Trombolo. And I don't know why that's the cutest thing I've ever heard in my life. Is that from Pinocchio? Trombolo. I think it is. Now, Eva told police a very interesting story. She said that day in 1985, when Missy was picked up by Laura and driven out to the park, or the church or whatever Laura was saying, that Laura and Missy weren't really alone, that Eva was there too. Kind of. She said that when Laura picked Missy up, they were alone in Laura's car. That part was true. But that Eva was following behind Laura and Missy in her car. Now, why in the world would she do that? Well, alongside her in her car, that was following Laura and Missy in Laura's car, was Karen. Story's heating up now, right? Seems like things are getting a little too spicy for the pepper, is what I'm saying. Eva then told police that the group ended up at the area where Missy's body was later found, and that Missy, Karen, and Laura all got out of the car and walked off into the woods together, and Eva stayed in the car waiting for them. Eva then told police an interesting story. She told police that that day, all of them had driven up to the area where Missy's body would later be found. That when they got there, Missy, Karen, and Laura all got out of the car and they walked out into the forest, and Eva stayed and waited at the car. She didn't really know what was happening, according to her. She said that she doesn't know if Missy knew what was happening. She doesn't know if Missy even knew that they were following behind in their car, but that they all walked up into the forest together. And after some time, Karen and Laura came back, but Missy never did. Now, why didn't Eva come forward sooner? I'm not really sure. She has said that she was scared. She was scared of getting in trouble for her part in the case. She was scared of what Laura and Karen may do to her in light of her betrayal if she did go forward. Either way, she didn't. And what actually ended up really pushing her in the direction of coming forward, and like the thing that really broke her, was the death of her own brother. Her 18-year-old brother ended up committing suicide, which is just like so fucking sad, man. It's always, that said really, really gets me. But she said after that happened, the pain that she felt really solidified in her something. And it was that, imagine what Missy's family was going through, not even knowing who had killed her. And anyways, she said that this was too much for her, and it's what broke her because it was too much pain for her to bear. But there's also rumors that have been reported that rumors started going around the neighborhood that Eva was involved, because there were rumors that Missy had been messing around with Eva's boyfriend as well at the time. So it's really unsure what pushed her to come forward, but she did. And in her coming forward, police were able to finally make an arrest in her murder, in Missy's murder. Clearly is what I meant. So naturally, upon hearing this from Eva, police go right to the source and they go to Karen and they're like, okay, this is what we heard. What the fuck? And this is when Karen finally, for the first time, is honest about what happened that day. Karen tells police that her, Missy, and Laura walked off into the woods together while Eva waited in the car. So exactly the same as Eva's accounting of what happened that day. She said that the girls were walking for a while and that they were kind of like forcing her to go. They were bullying her, as she said. And that at some point, Missy got so exhausted and so upset that they had to stop, and she like sat down on a rock and was just crying. And that the girls then grabbed her hair and started chopping off chunks of her hair. As I said, those big hunks of her hair that were missing. And the whole time Missy just cried and screamed and asked them like, why are you doing this to me? And they told her that they were doing this because she was like this and a whore and was stealing the girls' boyfriends, supposedly. It's just so fucking stupid. They said they then got her up and they continued walking until they came to the creek. And that's when Laura was like, oh, Missy, like, come get in the creek with me. And I'm sure it was in like a very creepy, like threatening way because of what they had already done to her. And obviously she's like, no, I don't want to fucking do that, obviously. But regardless, Karen pushed Missy into the water with Laura. The girls then grabbed Missy and tied her hands behind her back and then started pushing her head into the water. Laura was, pushing her head into the water, and Karen then helped dislodge that log, that 4-foot, 100-pound log, before she said that she got out of the water and just turned her back and left Laura and Missy alone, knowing full well that Laura was planning to murder Missy. So with this story, the girls were arrested, obviously, and when Irene, Missy's mother, found out about the arrests, she said, and I quote, "It was like somebody punched me in the stomach. I was shocked. I walked towards my room and passed out." The girls were charged with murder, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and aiding in the commission of a felony. Karen was held without bail, and Laura was held at $1 million bail, but obviously didn't post bail, so she stayed in jail. Karen claimed that the girls never intended to kill Missy initially. That was never part of her plan, that they were just going to take her out there and like bully her and beat her up a bit and torment her because they were so angry with her and jealous of her. But that they never intended to actually murder her that day. After the arrest, the real truth about Missy and Karen's friendship became more well known to everyone who was interested in the case. Many people who knew both girls said that Karen was very obsessive and also very, very jealous all around of Missy. That Missy was considered the prettier one, the more popular one, the one that just sort of had like an ease in life and just simply was herself, where Karen wasn't seen the same. She was seen as like a little less pretty, like a larger girl, and that she had to always kind of try to prove who she was to people and didn't have the same ease through life as Missy did. Missy's family kind of believes this as well and thinks even farther that in killing her, she was trying to then take over Missy's life, and that's why after doing so, she moved in with Missy's family and was like there to console them and like stay in her house and live where she lived. And it's just because, again, Missy and Karen were seen as complete opposites personality-wise and physically. Missy was petite at only 5'2" and only 90 pounds, and she would often get a ton of attention from all the boys in the area. And Karen was taller and considered by her peers to be a little overweight, and we all know what dicks kids can be. And in addition to that, it seems that Karen may have been jealous of Missy's life as a whole, as seeing her as this like very beautiful, happy, wonderful girl coming from a whole and loving family, even though her parents were divorced, so it wasn't like this whole family structured unit. That's how Karen saw it, because Karen was actually adopted. And though her parents literally went out and chose her, they wanted a baby to love and to hold and to cherish, and they went out and chose her specifically and loved her fiercely, she still felt unwanted and rejected by her birth parents, where Missy didn't have birth parents reject her. It does seem like Karen was probably having trouble dealing with the guilt of what she did, whether she felt bad or she was worried about getting caught, I'm not sure. But she did start heavily drinking, and due to that she gained like a good amount of weight, and she was drinking all the time. And Irene, Missy's mother, even asked Karen, like, are you okay? Why are you drinking so much? Because like she would see it, because Karen was literally staying in her house, and Karen would just say, you know, I lost my best friend. And apparently Laura was having a hard time with it too, and she seemed to be struggling just as bad as Karen did. She wasn't shoving herself in Missy's family's faces as much as Karen was, but her mother, Missy's mother, said of Laura and her demeanor after the murder, and I quote, "She came over here a couple of times all depressed. She said she wanted to kill herself because she was the last person to see Missy alive." When they told me that it was Karen and Laura, I didn't believe the cops. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So, during the trial, Laura Doyle's ex-boyfriend testified against her, and he testified that a month before the murder, a month before Laura and Karen took her up to those frickin' woods and drowned her in ankle-deep water, that Laura had threatened to murder Missy. He said his name was Victor, and Victor said that, okay, I'm going too fast. Victor was Laura's ex-boyfriend. Victor was also Missy's ex-boyfriend. Missy had dated him first, and Laura had dated him after. And it seems like maybe these girls would not be so jealous of their friend if they would stop dating their friend's exes, because obviously these boys were into her enough to date her at one point, so they're clearly attracted to her, and maybe this would have solved some problems. But anyways, Victor and Laura had been dating, and he actually ended up breaking up with her because she was too jealous of a person. Apparently she was incredibly jealous, incredibly possessive. No matter what girl he would talk to, she would like lose her shit, and she was particularly pissy and jealous of him talking to Missy. So he broke up with her. And then about 6 weeks before the murder, he was at his house, and apparently Missy was there too. And Laura showed up unexpectedly. She was just driving by and happened to see them. She says she saw them kissing. I don't know if that's true. It hardly matters, but she got pissed. She got out of her car. She starts screaming. She starts fighting with both Missy and Victor and going at it. And he's like, you know what? Get out of here. This is my house. Just leave. Like, don't be here. And she said at that time, I'll kill the bitch. Apparently, though, this wasn't taken seriously because Laura was just like a very intense person, especially where her boyfriends were concerned. She was the type that would even like carve their initials into her skin and shit. So who knows? Because clearly Missy still trusted her enough to go and hang out with her after this, which sucks, but you don't expect that your friends are going to fucking murder you. The prosecutor said during the trial of Missy, and I quote, "Her only problem, at least on that fateful day, was that she was very popular with the boys, and this drove Laura Doyle and Karen Severson crazy. In March of 1990, both Karen and Laura were found to be guilty of second-degree murder, and they were both given 15 years to life in prison, and they would both be eligible for parole in only 7 years. Initially, the prosecution wanted to go for first-degree murder, but they were not able to convince a jury that this was premeditated and that the girls did go there with the intention and the plan of murdering Missy. The prosecution said of the murder, and I quote, "Our position was that this crime was a deliberate, well-planned torture and execution of Missy and needed to be treated as such." Karen served 23 years of her sentence and was released in December of 2011 at age 45. Her daughter was raised by her parents during her time in jail. Irene said of Karen's release, and I quote, "I wish that girl would die. I feel bad for my sons. I feel bad for everybody who knew her. This was a terrible injustice, a terrible injustice. I don't understand why. People who commit murder, they let them out. I can't sleep. I can't think. I can't eat. It's been 26 years. It feels like yesterday. Not one day, not 1 minute, not 1 second do I not think about Missy. People say, it's been 10 years, 20 years. I don't care if it's 50 years. I'll never get over my daughter." Missy's brother, Chris, said of his sister, and I quote, "I remember her being outgoing, loving, and trusting everybody. And that was her downfall." Laura Doyle was released in December of 2012, and she too was 45 years old, and she had only served 22 years of her sentence. Missy's mother, Irene, said of Laura's release, and Laura as a person, and I quote, "I hate her, I hate her, I hate her. She did nothing but damage my life. Both should have suffered the death penalty. They are free. My daughter is in the ground." And we often see so many parents and so many family members be like positive and diplomatic and political and just like so like, and I never understand it. And this is the type of energy and feeling that I can at least relate to personally, because I feel like I would be the same way. I would be like, fuck these bitches. I wish they were dead. I don't care about them. Sorry, not sorry. They murdered my 17-year-old daughter. Like, I feel like that's how I would feel. So I get Irene. Now, I couldn't find anything online about Laura and where she is now or anything like that. It seems like she stayed pretty under the radar upon her being released, but not Karen. Okay. Karen went on to write books. She's now a published author who presents at high schools in the US talking about the dangers of bullying. She wrote and released 2 books about Missy's murder. At the time that Karen wrote her first book, she was quoted as saying that she was going to donate some, but not all, never all, of the proceeds of that book to anti-bullying campaigns. And when asked why she wasn't going to donate all of the proceeds, she said, and I quote, "I didn't say everything. I have to live. It's hard to get a job out there." Karen was then asked like how she'd respond to someone who said that there are like other ways to make money besides writing a story about the girl you murdered. And she said to this, she responded to this, and I quote, "Like what? Sell myself?" The idea that Karen could profit in any way from the murder of Missy pissed her family off so much. And they said, and I quote, "She keeps damaging us over and over and over. Well, it's going to stop today." Missy's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Karen, and then they also filed a lawsuit against Karen and the book's distributor for inflicting emotional distress on the family. We're filing a lawsuit against a vicious killer who has been profiting off her crime. It's not about us making money off this lawsuit. It's about letting the public know that crime is paying in California. And that quote was by Missy's sister-in-law. In addition to the civil lawsuit, Missy's family was pushing for legislation in the state that they would call Missy's Law, and it was intended to help family members of crime victims recoup money from a perpetrator who has profited from a book or movie deal based on their crime. Missy's mother said of this law, and I quote, "This law should have been passed a long time ago. It's like you're giving them an award for killing somebody." And Missy's family was successful, and Missy's Law was passed, which is awesome because I feel like I knew that that was a thing. I didn't know that this was the case that caused that to be a thing. You know what I mean? Like not being able to profit off your murders. Like I always knew that that was a thing, but I didn't know what caused it, and now I do. And now, if you didn't, you do as well. Karen has given many interviews since being released, most popularly, is that a word? The most popular of which being an interview she did with Dr. Phil. You can find this on YouTube. And Dr. Phil asked her like why she went to the funeral and inserted herself in Missy's family so much. And she said, and I quote, "I felt like I had an obligation to Missy's family after what I did. I also wanted to know how the police investigation was going. I wanted to know who the suspects were and what evidence they'd found." So she was very clearly also very interested in self-preservation and not so much the like caring about Missy's family, in my opinion, but I could be wrong, but tell me what you think. And to sort of close this case up, bring it all in, I'm going to end this with a quote that Missy's mother said that I think sums this case up pretty well and is a good message. And that is, and I quote, "All I can say is, girls, watch out whom you trust." And with that quote, that, my friends, is the story of the murder of 17-year-old Michele Missy Avila at the hands of her best friends. What do you think? How fucked up is that? Like, how does one do something like that? Can you even imagine? Think back to when you were 17 years old. Think about who your best friend was when you were 17 years old. Now think about killing them or them killing you. Isn't that so stupid? And over boys? Boys are fucking lame, especially teenage boys. Come on, guys. Come on. Come the fuck on. I am very curious about what you think, though. Do you think it was premeditated, or do you think it was just a case of aggressive bullying that just went way too fucking far? Because I'm personally torn, because when I think about the location, it definitely seems like a location that you wouldn't choose unless you had some pretty fucked up things you were planning to do. That's what I personally think. In an interview, I think it was the Dr. Phil one also, Karen said that they didn't even plan to go there that day. They were planning to go to the park, but as they were driving, there was the turn, and they made the turn, and then they found themselves there. And then that's just what happened. But I just don't know. The cutting off of her hair and the tying her hands behind her back, that's a lot, and it's pretty hard to think there wasn't a point where somebody could have been like, maybe we don't do this, and like that point of thought is premeditation. So I don't know, but let me know what you think. Anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, thank you for hanging out and remembering Missy and her family with me today. What happened is so messed up. I can't imagine being her mother. I understand that anger that she's been holding for so many years, because I can't imagine that I wouldn't have the same thing. I don't know how you lose a child at all and continue on, let alone a child to murder, and by her friend, the friend that you then let into your house afterwards, who stood by your side and helped you search and cried with you and had those moments with you, to know that this bitch is the one who killed your kid. I can't even deal with it. I feel like it's a special kind of evil who can do something like that specifically. To be able to look into the eyes of a grieving parent, know that you were responsible, and keep doing it. Like, I think there's a special kind of evil there. It's just like with the Skylar Niece case. I can't remember that stupid bitch's name, but it's the same thing. Sheila, was it Sheila? I think it was Sheila. It's just, that's a special kind of evil, and that's what Karen is. And now she's out, and that's concerning, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, please let me know of any cases you would like to see me cover down below, because as this case indicates, if you leave me a suggestion, I will try to get to it eventually, and when I do, I will give you a shout out for your suggestion, because I know you're filled with good idea and good taste. Good idea and good taste. Good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell, because I put out a new video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, and if you want to hang out more consistently, you can check down below. All my social media is linked down there. I have an Instagram page, I have a Twitter, I have a Facebook page, and I have a Facebook group, and I'm always trying to respond there as well as I can, as well as with the comments. I try to respond to all the comments. I've been getting a little overwhelmed recently because I got a lot going on, but I'm doing the best I can. And I want to hang out with you. Oh, and I also linked my merch store down there. You guys wanted some merch, so I made some merch. What else? Oh, I link all the makeup, earrings, nail polish, jewelry. Everything's linked down below for your convenience. So just check down there to find everything. You can also find other YouTube channels that I like and that I'm friends with and people that I know. If you want to hang out and support them as well, it's all down there for your convenience. Everything's down there for your convenience always. And with that said, that's pretty much it. I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.